All right, goblins and ghouls. So today we're going to be talking about two, also known as Rob Halford's failed industrial metal project. Well, is it really metal or is it more hard rock or is it just like industrial with a few metal touches here and there? I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. But it was a failed project, and I'm going to go over some aspects of why it probably didn't succeed. And well, first, let's just get into the very basics. The band released one studio album titled Voyeurs back in 1998, which saw little mainstream success, to put it lightly. The album title sort of has a sex and porn implication to it, and the album definitely has an industrial goth feel as well, which was pretty trendy at the time. And that trendiness most certainly contributed to the album and the band's failure because really that was around the time of new metal and a lot of, you know, metalheads at the time, or whatever you want to call them, metal fans, rock fans, they weren't all on board with new metal or industrial metal or all of that kind of stuff. And they saw Rob Halford as sort of hopping onto a bandwagon. Anytime a band or musician is seen as hopping on a bandwagon and changing their sound, some people will instantly reject it and maybe compel them to hop back off that bandwagon and sort of, you know, stick with their older sound, turn the clock back, go into the past, all that kind of stuff. And obviously that was clashing with Rob Halford and what he wanted to do. He wanted to move on, experiment with new sounds, and obviously he probably felt some commercial pressures to adapt to the changes that were happening at the time. You had bands like Korn, Nine Inch Nails, um, Ministry, etc. So he probably was like, you know what, I have to add some of those elements into my future projects, and two was part of that. And there, like I said before, there was actually like a sexual aspect to the band too, which is a little bit strange. That was probably something people weren't expecting. So Wikipedia describes a music video that two put out, and they say Halford directed or hired porn director Chi Chi LaRue to direct the video for the first single, I Am a Pig. And this video featured grainy S&M scenes of the band and various porn stars, including a few brief glimpses of Janine Lindemulder in a sex dungeon. So, yeah, some people probably saw that and they were like, huh, okay, all right. This is no longer the Judas Priest Rob Halford that some people were used to. Although, let's face it, Judas Priest did have some leather components to their looks and whatever. So there were already some implications of this kind of, side of Rob Halford. So to further confirm suspicions that the album had a sexual element to it, Rob Halford and guitarist John Five formed the band in 1996 under the name GIMP. Well, if you've ever seen Pulp Fiction, you surely know what GIMP can mean. There's that interesting scene where they're in the basement of Zed's little shop, and the two of the main characters encounter a GIMP character, dressed in the leather suit, and there's the whole S&M thing, and it's all pretty dark and strange. And so yeah, maybe that was what they were going for. I'm not really sure. But they had to change that name because apparently there was some other band that was operating under the name GIMP. Also, to further confirm that the album was industrial, it was produced by Trent Reznor or Reznor, however you want to pronounce it. I tend to emphasize the or. I go like Trent Reznor. Some people are more like Nur. Whatever. I'm getting sidetracked. Honestly, if I had titled this album, I probably wouldn't have went with Voyeur, although of course they were going for the dirty angle. But I might have called it something cheesy like maybe Toxic Metal or something like that. I mean, you still get some industrial metal emotions from the term toxic metal, but it's nice and cheesy. I honestly think some of the ideas on the album aren't too bad, and the musicianship by John Five and the others is basically fine, though it's actually pretty understated, which it's not really exactly a metal album. Most of the time, it's really more like a it's pretty synthy and dancey. The songwriting just doesn't have much that hooks you as a listener either. So I think people who were listening to it expecting like a really headbanging type album, I think they were kind of let down because it's really not that heavy of an album. And some albums might require more than one listen to catch your ear, but with a debut album like this, you need to have at least one hit song to get any sustained interest, and I just think they didn't have it on here. That being said, the album's not as bad as some would suggest. You could check it out at some point just for the novelty of it, maybe. If I was to say, which songs are actually the best from the album, I would say My Ceiling's Low is possibly the best song. I would say a lot of his singing sounds like sort of a Billy Corgan impersonation in most of the songs. And as far as like another song that's okay, I guess I would say Hey Shalala and Deep in the Ground have their moments too. But you know what? I don't really remember the songs after listening to them, which is never a good sign. And in pretty stark contrast, if you want a Rob Halford related song that does stick in your mind, go with something like Electric Eye, Breaking the Law, or You Got Another Thing Coming, which are definitely memorable tracks. You're really going to remember those riffs if you're paying attention at all. Like who hasn't heard the riff to Breaking the Law and said, "Wow, that's actually a memorable part of that song." You might get it stuck in your head even. It's one of those kind of things. But really from two, I don't remember any like catchy riffs or catchy choruses or anything like that. It's pretty good for an album that's like not catchy at all, but it's still not very good at all, if that makes sense to you. I should mention that the lineup, in addition to Halford and John Five, includes Bob Marlett, Ray Rendeau, Sid Riggs, and James Woolley. Unless I'm mistaken, I think that Sid Riggs plays for Rob Zombie as well, and I think John Five played for Rob Zombie, and I know John Five also played for Marilyn Manson. So yeah, it was that time when a lot of people were trying to branch out and have some bit of new metal in their arsenal, I suppose you might say. So what else can I say about this album? There was no second studio album because this one basically failed kind of hard. But I do wonder if they maybe could have fine tuned the music and songwriting, and if they could have just stuck with it. Obviously, not every band has success with their first album. In fact, some of them are basically stinkers. So I do wonder if some alternate universe version of the band exists, and two could be out there still writing weird songs and actually having considerable success. maybe even on a death clock level or whatever, something like that. I'm not sure if the multiverse theory of the universe is actually correct, but it's fun to think about these things sometimes. So, really, if you're going to check this band out, you might want to keep in mind the novelty aspect of it. You might want to listen to it just for the sake of doing that, if nothing else. And of course, if you're a huge Rob Halford fan, you've already listened to this album. You're probably like, God damn it, why are you so critical of this album? It's actually a masterpiece, perhaps. Everybody has different opinions. And I'm sure some people out there actually do really like this album. Rob Halford also just wanted to branch out with this album, which in many ways I think is respectable. Why keep doing the same thing over and over again? I know there's sort of a cliche that when musicians try to branch out, they tend to, you know, branch off in shitty directions. But that's not always the case. Sometimes bands actually do grow when they change their sound. So when it comes to Rob Halford, he's not the most closed-minded guy when it comes to music styles or metal. He, for example, appeared on stage with Baby Metal, and you can see YouTube videos of that from 2016. Rob Halford reunited to record a cover of "Slow Ride" by Ozzy Osbourne for some classic rock tribute album. Oh wait, that never happened. That's just me saying that. But maybe they could do a version of that. Like, wouldn't it be neat to like hear a version of Foghat's Slow Ride by like Rob Halford? Or maybe they could do a metaled out version of Some Enchanted Evening or something like that. If that sounds too odd, keep in mind Rob Halford and other metal musicians have done Christmas albums before. In fact, he's got a pretty decent version of Oh Holy Night from his Winter Songs album that I actually listened to in preparation for this, because I wanted to revisit, some of Rob Halford's musical output. And why not listen to a Christmas song if you're going to do that? Sort of an obvious choice. See how far he actually did branch out. And it turns out, he did a halfway decent version of Oh Holy Night. It's actually more legit and less goofy sounding than I expected, especially when he doesn't sing it in the high pitched voice that he sometimes uses, and that I'm actually not a huge fan of. I mean, to be honest, I know some of you are going to be like, "What? You're not a big fan of the high pitched metal voice?" Well, no, I'm kind of not, honestly. When it comes to like metal and screaming, I'm usually more into the like growling thing, or like more normal sounding screaming. When it's like high pitched, like it's I don't know, it just doesn't work for me most of the time. So if two ever would reunite and put out another album, maybe they could call it Rise from the Ashes or something like that. Perhaps through some record label like Century Media Records or something. Metal Blade, perhaps. I don't know. Is Metal Blade even a thing anymore? I'm not sure. Rob Halford's little side project, which is what it basically became, was disbanded in the late 1990s, but it still lives on within music streaming platforms, and you can find the videos on YouTube and listen to them to your heart's content. Is that how that saying goes? I don't know. Is that the heart's intent? Well, whatever. I'm not sure. I'm just riffing at this point, and I've basically run out of steam. I have nothing more to say about this. So, it was a novelty album. It had its cute little moments, but you know, it is what it is. So, all right.